after almost 17 years of conscious practice, I've whittled this down to about the simplest technique I can give people. And if they follow my instructions and not their fears, this is like one of my mantras for my workshops: follow my instructions, not your fears. And you will succeed at this. But typically it's the determination, it's the setting the time aside for it, getting over, your fears, in the sense of, not just getting over them, but working on them and realizing that, am I going to let my fears hold me back my whole life? Or at some point, am I actually going to, do the self-forgiveness work? Am I actually going to look at this stuff and stop bypassing, even the pain that might be associated with an old memory? Because typically when we bypass pain, when we bypass, what happens, we're bypassing wisdom as well. There's always a gift in every lesson. And if we're bypassing the lesson, you don't get the wisdom, you don't get the gift. It's that simple.
Right.
We don't keep walking down the same roads. We only keep walking down the same road because we don't change. We start to change, we start to walk down new roads, new doors start to open to us. So, this is part of the spiritual path. If you want to progress at this stuff, it's a daily practice. It can't be like a once a month practice. You might then get, it's a numbers game, maybe 1 out of 12 practices in a year, because it's once a month, you might get one result. But is that what you're really looking for? Or are you looking to be able to lie down at night and have your bedroom become your portal to other worlds every night, every single night? Because that's the reality it can be for everyone. And I'll break it down. It can be as simple as, lying down and dedicating 3 hours. Let's say you go to bed earlier than usual. So if you typically go to bed at maybe midnight, you would go to bed at maybe 10 p.m. If you typically go to bed at 10 p.m., maybe you go to bed at 9 p.m. And then what I would do is I would make sure I then set the alarm to where I wake up 3 hours before I would normally need to get up and get on with my day.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're now going to do with that 3 hours is you're just going to say, okay, I'm going to go to the toilet. I'm going to maybe just go and get a drink of water, just, a couple ounces, because you don't want to then drink a bunch of water and then have your bladder in the middle of the experience, be an obstacle. All right. So you go to the toilet, get yourself a little bit of water just to wet your mouth. And then let me just unravel what you do next. Typically, if you're going back into your own bed, because you might have a limitation of space, you might be sharing a house with somebody, sharing an apartment with somebody. So maybe you only have your bedroom. You can't go to the sofa, because some people say go to a different environment, different room in the house, because by going to that different space, you're saying, okay, when I'm in this space, I'm focused on astral projection. When I'm in my bed, I'm sleeping. Right. But if you haven't got the space, then not a problem. What you could do is you just take your pillows from one end of the bed, the normal sleeping position, put the pillows on the opposite end of the bed. This is now your astral projection exploration position. And you make those strong associations. Okay, so for me, there's typically a few things I have tool-wise. I have surgical tape. Now, this one might seem very strange for people. They may not. I've never heard that as an astral projection, technique. I've heard of like wearing eye masks and things like that, or earplugs so I can block out the external world. Surgical tape is important for the reason that nasal breathing is a big part of what will fuel the experience. And what typically happens is when we start going deep with the practice, let's say we're lying still for a good half an hour, we have our eye mask on, we haven't moved our bodies, we're doing all the right things, but then we notice our mouth is very dry. Because what's happened is your mouth has probably just come open. Maybe you're a mouth breather. 90% of the public, of the general public, are mouth breathers. Yeah. Your mouth is going to get insanely dry. That's going to become a distraction. But also, because you're a mouth breather, you're poisoning your chi. You're poisoning the very energy that is helping you, that will help you fuel the out-of-body experience. And a lot of people are completely oblivious to this. Even a lot of teachers are completely oblivious to this fact. You have to learn to exclusively breathe through your nose when you're doing the astral projection practice. So I get surgical tape in particular, because, it isn't going to, hurt my face, not going to hurt my skin. So I'll take a strip, put it over my mouth, take a few more strips, top and bottom, just to make sure my mouth is not going to open up during the experience. It may sound strange, but what would you do to have an astral projection experience. You know, do you think taping your mouth up is the worst of what you could do? You know, but it is a wonderful starting point. So I tape up my mouth. I then, instead of wearing like a typical eye mask, I want my eyelids to be properly, you know, down. I don't want them to open. I used to recommend an eye mask called the Mind Fold, where you can literally open your eyes behind the mask, fully open them, and it's still pitch black. But the problem is, if your eyes open up behind the mask, let's say that you wake up in the night and there is a little bit of light coming through the mask, that itself, you know, or you know, could be a distraction. Or let's say you fall asleep and then you wake up again. One of the things that we do that break the state straight away is we open our eyes. So I usually take a bandana and I kind of wind it up, and then I put it around my eyes and fasten it, you know, in the back. So I've now got a bandana, which is holding the eyelids absolutely shut. And that I'll get back to in a second why that's important. So I've got the tape on my mouth. I've got the makeshift eye mask with a bandana. I've got some earplugs. I'm ready to go. I'm now going to lie still for 3 straight hours. And if you do this right, you won't be able to move anyway, because you're going to get into paralysis. You might get into paralysis several times throughout that 3 hours. So what I will then do, so I start the practice by doing some breath work. And now I'm breathing through my nose. Obviously, if you have a cold, that's not going to be able to happen on that day, because you're probably going to have your nose blocked up. But if your nasal passages are open, even if one's open, you're good to go. So I would start with about 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of clean breath work. Just breathing in through your nose, all the way down into your solar plexus. So you're doing diaphragm breathing, not this thoracic breathing in the chest. Taking the breath deep down into the, you know, the belly. And I want people to, you know, to really use their imagination here, use their powers to visualize. As they're breathing in air, to keep in mind, you're actually breathing in prana. But prana saturates the etheric, you know, the etheric and the physical world. Air is like the physical manifestation of prana. So I want them to imagine that it's actually coming through every pore in their body. When they breathe in, the prana is coming through every pore of their body. You know, that chi energy is just building inside them now. And for maybe 10, 15 minutes, that's all they're focused on, is just the breathing. They're not even thinking astral projection yet. You're just focused on breathing. Very good, proper breath work. And during that time, you can use something like a mantra. You've got your mouth taped up, so you're not going to be able to, you know, externalize it very well, but you can internalize it very well. Something like maybe Aum, so A-U-M. So in your head, you're making the sound of Om, and you're imagining that all spreading vibration of Om, opening up your third eye, opening up your pineal gland, opening your heart center. So you're just sort of visualizing this stuff while doing the breath work. This is powerful, you know, because you're concentrating on non-physical energy. You're putting your attention on, you know, on this on the non-linear realms. At some point, your physical body falls off the radar because you're concentrating fully on the non-linear realms. So let's say after about 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes of the very pure breath work, you stop. You then just normal shallow breathing through the nose, and you start using affirmations, maybe things like, now I activate my astral body. Now I raise my internal vibrational energy. Simple little ideas, simple little affirmations. These affirmations are your intent, all right? And so I've got my eye mask on. I now start to visualize. I'll just sort of imagine stretching my astral body, stretching my etheric body like a cat. Like I'm not moving my physical body at all. I'm not even thinking physical. I'm just thinking moving my astral body, limbs, my arms, my legs. And if you can imagine that etheric body just overlays your physical body perfectly, all right? And now you're stretching it. And maybe you're arching your back, but again, not your physical. This is just a non-physical exercise. And at first it may feel forced. It may feel like nothing's happening. But as the law of attraction principle, where attention goes, energy flows. So we're tapping into this sort of idea. So we're putting our energy before us. So I'm now if you like, pretending I can stretch my energy body. And I then might sort of contract it, expand it, contract it, while keeping my physical body perfectly still. If I feel any tension in my physical arms, I totally relax again. And I focus on just recreating these strong physical-like sensations without the physicality, without moving my physical body. And then after maybe just a few minutes of that, I'll imagine vibrations, tingling sensations. It may happen for real anyhow, but if it's not happening yet, I'm just imagining it. I'm imagining sort of just suddenly floating upwards a little bit, and then suddenly standing up in my etheric body in my bedroom. And maybe I'll imagine, turn around, look at my physical body. What would that look like? I imagine this magnetic force between my physical body and my etheric body, and I can feel that pull. And now I want to go to another room, but I imagine myself walking through a door. Maybe the door is physically open. I forgot to shut it last night when I got into bed, but the door in my imagination is closed. And now I want to imagine walking through it. What would it feel? What would you imagine it would feel like to walk through the energy substructure of a door, the energy substructure, the energy matrix of a wall? It would be full of vibration, and you're walking through it. And just imagining that sensation can be powerful in itself. I might then imagine myself in the next room, the next adjacent room. I might interact with some objects. This is now getting onto a technique called the target technique. But the idea here is you're making realistic movements without moving your physical body, because it's now all just imagined. And every now and again, I'll just imagine myself back in my body, and I'll stretch like an astral cat again. I'll imagine the vibrations again. I'll imagine floating up again, standing in the room again. This time I'll imagine going further afield, maybe to the neighbor's house, maybe not entering the house, but going and walking around the neighborhood, going to the corner shop, the grocery store. What would it be like if I was walking through one of the grocery store aisles? What colors could I visualize? How can I make this more real? Focus on one object, maybe an object like some fruit. Just focus all your attention on building the colors, building the shape, and then building the sensation of touch, all in the imagined space. But this whole world has been imagined by, another dimension of reality. This is like the simulation hypothesis. Our reality is being projected from information on the edge of our universe. We don't know what's at the edge of our universe. We could be like in the film Men in Black, the galaxy around the cat's neck, the little trinket around its neck. We could literally be, in a simulation that's being managed by robots that are controlled by AI on the next dimension up. And that simulation is operating on a smartphone of a 10-year-old girl in yet another dimension, where they discovered their reality is being projected from, yet another space. So we don't know, but this is part of the excitement of it. Once you start to get these experiences happening, you do start to experience and encounter other levels of yourself. And that starts to push this up even more, because you then might think to yourself, wait a second, if this is a projected reality, so therefore all reality is actually taking place within a mental reality. Nothing's actually physical, but yet this is like a program that says this is what physical feels like. So this is a rule right here. The rule says this is what physical feels like. All right. So when you enter a virtual reality, they're creating vests now that you can wear that creates this, sort of vibration, or, they envision little robots in the future that will, you'll have little air blowing on you and things like this. We're dealing with virtual reality in the, 2020s, which is, if you can imagine, this stuff would look obsolete to the next level up. The virtual reality stuff we're creating on this level would look like a kindergartner created, this, and it's a 2D project. I mean, it's just our technology versus the actual technology that drives these realities is what would seem like magic to us. The expression, technology gets to such a level, it seems like magic to, to us. And if a UFO landed in our garden, we wouldn't even be able to imagine what's driving that. So let's get back to the practice. So for me, I'm just getting lost in the imagination. I bring myself back to the sense of my body. I start afresh again with the stretching, and I'll then just keep going for 3 hours. Now, what happens within 3 hours if I fall asleep? Fantastic. As long as I've fallen asleep without being lazy, because a lot of times people just get bored and then they just fall asleep.
Right.
I'm not talking about that. When I say fall asleep, you've been full on practicing, and then you've just allowed your awareness to dip a little bit here and there. Like when you've imagined yourself stop walking around your living room, and then suddenly you imagine yourself back at your body. And before you start imagining stretching your energy body again, just relax, let go of all thoughts, just for a few seconds. And you will just, your awareness will dip a little bit, which takes you down to that borderline state where things can start to happen. All right, so that's what I'm talking about. And if you dip unconscious, that's not a problem. You've done that on purpose, because I guarantee you within, a few minutes, you've practiced so much already, you might wake up on the other side. You might suddenly be in a dream in the etheric body, but because you've concentrated so much, you've stayed focused, suddenly something might trigger, oh, wait a second, this is a dream because I was just practicing OBE. Boom, you're awake. Let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say you literally just fall unconscious, and then minutes later, wake back in your body. When you wake back in your body, if you keep it perfectly still, and this is where the bandana comes in over just a regular eye mask. The bandana can be pulled tight enough to where, again, your eyelids are pinned shut. They're not opening. When you open your eyes, do something as little as open your eyes after waking up again, it can break that state that you're in for about 30 seconds. You're in an altered state for about 30 seconds, which is completely conducive for an OBE. But once we open our eyes, we start to break that state almost instantly. So an eye mask is ideal, but something that keeps the eyes shut in particular is even better. Bandanas are great for that. So every single time you fall unconscious, through proper practice and then wake up again, your eyes are shut. Maybe I would just take maybe 10, 15, 20 deep conscious breaths through the nose, through the diaphragm again, reaffirm, now my astral body is revved up, ready to go. I'm practicing OBE, and you just start to practice again. And let's say 10 minutes later, you fall asleep again. You're within 3 hours. So as long as you say to yourself, I am not giving up until something happens. You may only be an hour and a half into the practice. You're not keeping time exactly, but you don't know. Could be an hour and a half left on the clock. Right. Within an hour and a half of, an hour and a half more of this sort of practice, something is going to happen. You're either going to wake up on the other side, or you're going to feel a conscious transition with powerful vibrations. And if it doesn't happen the first night, then you're like a trained Jedi master. You are practiced in the art of patience. All right. You're not going to say to yourself, oh, that sucked. I knew that wasn't going to happen. That's when your ego comes in. It's like, oh, I knew this wouldn't work. I knew that guy, Todd Acamesis, was talking rubbish. That's the ego. And your ego is happy for you to learn stuff, but it wants you to fail. All right. It literally wants you to learn something so that when you fall, when you consider you failed, it then gets to kick you. That's when your negative self-talk is getting you down. You're like, oh, I'm never going to try this again. That was a waste of my time. No, you are a practiced Jedi master. Patience is one of your virtues. So the next day, you line yourself up with another 3 hours. The next day, another 3 hours. Maybe you're committing 3-4 times a week to that sort of practice. I guarantee you within the first week, something will happen. But you have to have this mindset, I will not give up until it happens. It can be that simple. It will work. You don't need anything more detailed than that. You just need the dedicated practice. You need, this awareness that I'm going to see this through, and it will happen. And you keep a dream journal, you keep yourself a journal. No matter what happens, you just write in that journal. Even if there's nothing to remember, you write in the journal, I woke up at 4 o'clock to practice, 4 a.m. to practice, put the surgical tape on my mouth. I was fully dedicated to practice. I did 3 hours, felt some tingling sensations at one point. I spoke to my higher self. I called in my guides. I asked beings from other dimensions to put portals next to my bed. I really loaded it all in there. And you're writing this out in the journal. Jesus, man. Writing stuff like that in your journal, that's high inspiration. And that's the type of high inspiration that is going to bring about high strangeness.
I like that last part. Yeah.